The basement of La Penta, it's WICR.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I am Bobby Bias here. I own a college's voice of professional wrestling, and this is a new segment of the Countout. Now, I know it's been a while since I've been up here. It's been since like late November, early December around that time. So there's lots to catch up on, but happy 2016 to everyone. I know it's almost March, but I think it's kind of appropriate to start with that. All right, so the first segment that I'm going to start with today will be just to catch up, on anything that's happened since the last time I was down here. I said up here before. Now I'm saying down here. Oh, well. All right, so let's get started. Um, TLC came on before I left, and overall, the pay-per-view was pretty good. It was better than Survivor Series, obviously. But, so you have that. And then, what? Wait a minute. So, sorry, the technical difficulty there, but it was a decent pay per view. It was way better than the Survivor Series, so there's that. And since I've left, Roman Reigns became champion, and the IC title has switched back to Kevin Owens. Kalisto won the U.S. championship, so a good amount of changes happened. Charlotte's still Divas champ, but and the New Day are still tag team champions, but that's pretty much mostly what's happened. Now, there's been obviously huge news in the Royal Rumble, which was in late January. Now, that's when I said I was probably going to be back here, but I guess that didn't happen because, with all the tech stuff here in the studio. But just to quickly recap what happened at the Rumble, first of all, the huge news. First of all, Royal Rumble in general was a great pay-per-view. All the matches were great. Every title match was great. And you had the actual Royal Rumble match itself. The Royal Rumble match itself, probably the biggest surprise was when one of the greatest wrestlers in the world, AJ Styles, made his debut. He came in at number 3, and didn't really like the directing of the actual show itself. They really showed Roman Reigns' face rather than a Titantron that would have, AJ Styles. He didn't have his Titantron, have him coming out. But nonetheless, he came out, huge crowd pop from the Orlando crowd, and it was almost a little surreal to see him in a WWE ring, to hear Michael Cole saying AJ Styles' name. It was almost hard to believe, but lo and behold, there he was. And he actually lasted pretty long. Now, he didn't win. I didn't really expect him to win the whole thing. He just got there. Vince McMahon isn't a huge fan of having guys who aren't, who didn't come through the WWE system to just go there and just win titles automatically. And he's probably not going to win the main title for a while either. He's probably going to start with the Intercontinental Championship or the U.S. title, so that's probably what's going to happen. And then you have the results. Mainly, the more important result was Triple H winning the whole thing. It was one of those more predictable things where, you felt like after what Roman Reigns did to Triple H at TLC, that something was about to happen between the two, and Triple H ended up winning the title to basically have the authority, have a championship rather than having Roman, who's being branded as like the new Steve Austin, although he's not. Being a whole anti-authority figure and everything. And so that came out of the Rumble, and so there you go. The Wyatt family attacked Brock Lesnar during the Rumble, but that amounted to nothing really. And then of course there's the news that's also just as big as maybe Styles coming to the WWE or Triple H winning the whole thing, was Daniel Bryan. Now, Daniel Bryan was a crowd favorite. When he was at the top, he would get the biggest pops that any performer would get in the WWE, but the unfortunate news came that he had to retire because of concussion symptoms. I have to get this out there. Because of concussion symptoms, he had to actually retire. And it was actually a huge deal. This was on actual legitimate news outlets like Fox News and Fox Sports News and even ESPN, although people don't really like ESPN as much, which I get. The fact that these news outlets are reporting on this means it's a huge deal, because usually you don't really see anything WWE or pro wrestling related being talked about on non-wrestling based news outlets, but this ended up becoming a huge deal. This happened on Raw, I believe, 3 weeks ago. Yeah, it was 3 weeks ago, and it was really any retirement announcement is usually very emotional. A while back, Mark Henry did his retirement speech. It was a goof, obviously it was fake, but people were really starting to get behind him the whole time. He just did it to attack Cena, which I thought was pretty funny. Then you had Shawn Michaels' retirement speech. You had Edge's retirement. They're always emotional. This one was no less different. You had all the fans chanting yes, once it was over, or at certain points, and then his wife, Brie Bella came out. It was a really emotional thing. Daniel Bryan truly was. The reason why people like Bryan so much really was because he was the quintessential underdog. He didn't have the look of a prototypical, WWE champion where he'd be, he'd basically have like the bodybuilder look and would be strong. He's built like a regular guy. He's kind of short, it's kind of small, but just based off of pure passion and wrestling ability, he was able to have the crowd behind. He was able to have the fans behind him, and was able to use that in order to become the champion that he became. And so yeah, that was the thing with Daniel Bryan. We just found out that there will be 2 new WWE Hall of Fame inductees. One of them I'm a little questionable about, but the other one is pretty obvious. The one it's pretty obvious is Sting. While Sting only wrestled twice in the WWE, he's had one of the most illustrious careers of any pro wrestler, well, out in America, but of any pro wrestler, he's had one of the most illustrious careers dating back to the 80s until as recently as like June or July of 2015. So that definitely makes sense. And the other one is the Godfather. Now, this one's a little questionable because, while people remember the Godfather's gimmick during the Attitude Era where things would be a lot raunchier, he didn't really accomplish a whole lot. I mean, sure, people liked him, but him being his character being a pimp and everything. But I'm trying to figure out, are they retiring the actual wrestler, or are they just retiring the character? Because I don't know. I just think there are probably other people a little more deserving. I'm not even sure, but that one just seems a little questionable to me that he'd be inducted. I mean, then again, the actual Hall of Fame doesn't have there's no physical Hall of Fame, so it doesn't really matter. But I mean, there's not really a whole lot of merit in it either. There's a lot of wrestlers in the WWE Hall of Fame who shouldn't be there. If it was legitimate, there's a lot of them that shouldn't be there. Like, for example, Rikishi really shouldn't be there. I mean, there's a whole bunch. So that's news coming out of there. Now, the thing is that I'm gonna, in the next segment, I'm gonna basically review and give the results to the pay-per-view Fastlane, which is the last pay-per-view before WrestleMania on April 3rd, day after my birthday, by the way. Now, the thing I didn't like about Fastlane really was at the end of the pay-per-view, you had absolutely no clue what the matches were going to be, because usually, like at last year's Fastlane, for example, after it finished, you knew what the pay-per-view matches were going to be. You knew what the WrestleMania matches were going to be, excuse me. But this year we only knew one because of the Royal Rumble. Actually, no, not even really, but we kind of got that. That was the only one. Every other match was pretty much a mystery. We would have to find out on the next Raw what the actual matches would be. And, the Raw after Fastlane was actually pretty good. So, that's what I have to say there. Now, the WrestleMania match, the Undertaker's WrestleMania match, I'm gonna talk about that in the next segment, the third segment actually. Little different, but what we were hoping for is really to have the Undertaker versus John Cena, but John Cena's still going through an injury, still recovering, at least I assume. So we're not gonna get that match this year at WrestleMania. And the WrestleMania match that they chose, at first, I wasn't too much of a fan of it, but then there was a stipulation added that made it more interesting. But I'm just really, I know I'm kind of spitballing here. I'm just trying to get people that are listening to, just catch up and remember what's happening from the time that I missed from being on the show. So I'm going to pretty much end the segment here, and we'll be back, and I'm going to give the review and results for Fastlane. So keep on listening, and we will be right back.